and welcome to Moving in Darkness. I'm Erica Prather, National Outreach Representative with Defenders of Wildlife. And if you've never heard of Defenders, basically what we do is advocacy, outreach, and legislation around protecting key threatened and endangered species in the United States. And today my presentation is basically focused on kind of the overlap between DarkSky advocacy and advocacy for species. I kind of started noticing pretty quickly that basically, we like to talk about species as indicators of ecosystem health, but the truth is that also a dark sky is usually an indicator of a healthy ecosystem. It's not just the species that we're going to be talking about today. Circadian rhythms of both humans and plants are affected negatively by light pollution. And we're gonna do this a little bit creatively. I'm gonna play a sound today, and we're going to then have you guess. I won't be able to know if you guessed correctly or not. And then I'm gonna talk about the species and what it is that's, what kind of light pollution it is that's affecting it. So the first sound. That is an ocelot. I am going to say that the first several species I'm going to cover are here in the Sonoran Desert. I'm actually in Tucson, Arizona. And this is a really special cat that roams in the borderlands. It is a nocturnal hunter and travels quite a range in the nights when it's hunting and finding a mate. So go to the next one to guess. Kind of sounds like a monkey, but it's not. This is the lesser long-nosed bat, another beloved species in our Sonoran Desert. Right here, it's pollinating an agave. So if you are a tequila or a mezcal fan, then you love it, lesser long-nosed bat, because it keeps our agave populations healthy and multiplying. This is another species that doesn't migrate in the Sonoran Desert and obviously nocturnal, so very negatively impacted by light pollution. Really funky sound, introducing the Cactus virginis pygmy. This is about 3-inch tall owl, and as we all know, owls are nocturnal hunters. Really special animal that actually lives in our saguaro cactus here in the Sonoran Desert, and fewer than 50 of these left. So even if you've spent your whole life in the borderlands, you might not have ever come across this animal. It's that elusive. The howl of the wolf, but not just any wolf, the Mexican gray wolf. We have these in northern New Mexico and northern Arizona. They are the most endangered wolf in the world. Fewer than 100 left in the wild. Defenders is proudly the organization that got this recovery program on the ground. It's nearly a 30-year-old recovery program. Wolves are, absolutely critical to ecosystem health. We saw how much Yellowstone changed once wolves were reintroduced. And so it's our hope to have that same dynamic up here in the White Mountain and Gila region of the United States. But again, wolves hunt at dawn and dusk. They're more crepuscular species. They are very sensitive, very elusive, and very negatively impacted by light pollution. I want to say that all of these species that I just touched on, we call them borderland species. They inhabit critical areas of very dense biodiversity. These squares are areas that our biologists have identified as biologically rich, and all of these species move across the border. They migrate freely. They do not recognize the invisible line between the United States and Mexico. So you might have guessed it, that these species, the type of light pollution that is negatively affecting them is the border wall. To the right, you can see some of the infrastructure that we have taken photos of, the lighting on the wall. You know, the wall itself is obviously a major obstacle, but the lighting infrastructure is horrible and can blind a lot of these animals that are moving at night. And it's not just the border wall, it's also the infrastructure, the vehicles, the disruption. The light on the left is actually not for the wall at all, it's just for construction equipment. So these lighting structures have enormously horrible consequences for these very, very endangered species in our borderlands region. So much so that there's actually been studies and recommendations to the Department of Interior and Homeland Security to please avoid certain areas in particular, just based on light pollution. And unfortunately, they are not acknowledging this science. So moving on. That sound is the Perdido Key Beach Mouse, one that you might not think of off the top of your head, but absolutely critical for preventing storm surge as we see, you know, climate change changing our coastlines. This is a key seed dispersal for lots of different types of native grasses. In fact, some native grasses, this is the only species that disperses its seeds. So if you've ever had a mouse in the house, you know that rodent species are typically very nocturnal. And so this mouse is very negatively impacted by, this species rather, is very negatively impacted by light pollution. Another one I could not find a sound for, unfortunately, is the sea turtle, kind of classic example of light pollution negatively affecting a species. And it's not just that these guys are really cute, they also are critical for ecosystem health, nutrient cycling between the ocean and the shoreline. And this is sort of, when we think about species being negatively affected by light pollution, sort of the classic example, right? Like when the sea turtles eggs hatch and they are trying to migrate toward the moon, they can mistake beachfront property lighting for the moon. On the right, that's what happens. Unfortunately, they try to cross the road. And on the left, you can see one of those lighting structures, which is just totally unnecessary. No one's even out there. So a really easy thing to mitigate so that we don't continue to kill you know, thousands of these endangered species, both the mice and the turtles. Okay, next sound. One of the coolest sounds in the animal kingdom is made by the sage grouse, both the greater and venison sage grouse. They inhabit the area we call the sagebrush sea, which is kind of in the middle of the country, sagebrush country. We like to call them an umbrella species just because they are really cool looking, and by conserving them, we automatically can conserve all the things that rely on sagebrush habitat as well. So they have an interesting negative impact on light infrastructure. It's the oil and gas industry. The highest concentration of sage grouse is in Wyoming, and Wyoming happens to be the third place in the whole country where fracked gas flaring is the most prominent. Again, it's not just the flaring of fracked gas, but it's the infrastructure of the oil rig system, the lights, the sound, the lights of the cars driving to and from these facilities. Sage grouse are extremely, extremely sensitive species. They will not mate if they have a lot of disruption. It's the sound of water to talk about the Chinook salmon. Our Pacific Northwest team concentrates on conserving orca and salmon. And you know, they're tied to each other. The health of the orca is tied to the health of salmon. And we know that salmon populations are on the decline. There's lots of reasons for that, but I was pretty surprised that our team said light pollution was a horribly negatively impacted salmon populations, and this is why. You can see all the light pollution in this photo from the city. It basically draws the fish to the surface when the fish are fry, which is basically kind of like a baby fish. And so when they come up to the surface, predator species have easier access to them, so they can just snatch them up, and it's really hurting their chance of survival. This is a photo of a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Research Station that has showed that very drastic connection between light pollution and the survival of the Chinook salmon. This is the peregrine falcon, a classic Endangered Species Act success story, as it is no longer a listed species. Besides birds being awesome, they are critical at seed dispersal. They are indicators of ecosystem health. Just like bats, they keep the need for insecticides, herbicides, pesticides to a minimum because they naturally predate insects. And this one is pretty crazy. I think it's important to include a slide like this because it kind of seems sometimes in conservation like we're always after the fossil fuel industry, and that's true for several reasons, but the fact of the matter is, as we transition off of fossil fuels, we need to be very conscious about the renewable energy that we bring online and how it interacts with wildlife and biodiversity in general. And I don't think that when people made this massive solar collector in the middle of the Mojave Desert that they thought it would have these dire consequences. On the right, you can see that you can actually see this solar collector from the sky, from an airplane. And it basically draws birds in like a moth to a flame, and it actually evaporates them midair. We don't even have an accurate estimate of how much bird take there is at the solar collector. So again, just being conscious of how light affects our species negatively in ways we would never even imagine until it's too late. So that's basically it. You know, dark sky is the best sky. A dark sky is the best for species that are moving at night. It's an indicator of unfragmented habitat. And I think it's really amazing for us to envision as activists and advocates what we can do together to advocate for conservation measures for species. That means we're advocating for dark skies. And when we advocate for dark skies, we're advocating for more rich and biodiverse places. And both biodiversity and dark skies are beautiful, which is reason enough to care and want to protect them. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is eprather, Prather, @defenders.org. Thank you.